Well, welcome everybody to Innovation Futures, and this is the panel that starts at noon. And of course, if you're here, you're gonna get some of our kind of key innovators here in Hawaii. We got Chris Lee and Pat Sullivan, and so what we are gonna do is maybe provide each of them a chance to go through some of the slide decks that they have and sort of share the work that they've been involved in. And what I would like to do is I'd like to give them the time to go through those presentations, and then if there are questions that anyone from our audience would like to submit for our guests, feel free to put them into the chat, and I will go ahead and read them off to our two guests. I will first maybe introduce myself. My name is Burt. I'm the moderator for this panel. I'm the strategy officer for Broadband in the state of Hawaii. And also, I guess maybe they figured since I do a radio show on Hawaii Public Radio that they tapped me to be the moderator. And I'm happy to be a part of this and have both Chris and Pat share some of their insights into innovation in Hawaii. So with that, we'll just go ahead and get started, and we'll start off with Chris Lee. I'll let him do the full-on introduction, but he's the director of the Academy of Creative Media over at the University of Hawaii. He was one of the key guys, maybe the guy who helped it get established in the university system, and I'm sure he has a lot of great stories about how that happened. I got to learn from you, Chris, because I'm trying to get Broadband started, and it's a bit of a challenge.
Statistics are taken from DBET, and no, the first slide. Thank you. So you can see some numbers here, how DBET at least is calculating the percentage of the GDP, the growth of the creative sector, which I can't quite see because of my, here we are, over the last, up until 2017. It says 53,000 jobs and 6.2% of civilian jobs in Hawaii. The one figure that I do know is for sure is 2018. When you think about traditional film and television and now what's called streaming content production, we did $480 million in direct spend. So that's money that actually came into the state. It created probably about $1 billion of economic activity because of the multiplier effects and everything, and I think was a really good thing. In fact, since we passed Act 88 in 2006, before that, we never had $100 million a year in production. And since then, it's been a steady increase up to that number. In 2019, unfortunately, a new cap was placed on this incentive, and the spending fell to maybe 400. I've heard as low as 340, but I've heard both numbers. I haven't seen anything published officially, but essentially, we saw what happened in places like Louisiana and New Mexico, where for whatever reasons, we decided to cap this incentive, and the studios and networks responded in kind. So we'll see what happens coming in the future, but I do think this is a problem. Looking to the next slide, what's interesting is you can see this 2017, 53,000 jobs. This is from Pacific Business News from 2018, and this is the top 15 job sectors in the state. And the biggest one is 42,000 according to this. And I think these are all DOTEX numbers, I'm not sure. But if you look across this, and I apologize, the font's a little small to fit everything into one slide. We're not listed here. So one of the problems I think that I think we have is in sort of recognizing the impact that this sector has on us. And to be honest with you, on the previous information from how DBET considers the creative economy sector, I'm not exactly sure. I just know that when I look through this, I don't see us listed for some reason, and I'm not sure why that is. So I think that I do notice that when I do read about the movie business, it tends to be kind of a lot of negative articles about the fact that we do have these incentives. I think if you know anything about our incentives here in Hawaii, excluding the cap issue, it's 20% of your direct spend. In other words, you got to actually, turn in your receipts to get anything back. It's 20% here on Oahu, and it's 25% on the neighbor islands. And the extra 5% is to recognize the fact that the bulk of the crews are here on this island, and it does cost more to shoot on the neighbor islands. So it's to help the neighbor islands out. So you have that going on. And a lot of people very often are saying, well, we should cap it, or why do we do this, or they're gonna come here anyways and stuff like that. And it's just basically not true. And I think now that the cap did go into effect, we have the empirical evidence of it, that in fact, we will see a decline for the first time since 2006 in the amount of production that comes here. And in my opinion, we really should be $1 billion a year direct spend industry. We're constrained by the lack of infrastructure, which is an issue we can talk about later. But we have I think we sort of kneecapped ourselves to a certain extent. And when people talk about, well, why are you picking winners? Why are you choosing to, take care of that industry? I talk about, can we back up, please? No, back up, thank you. There we go. Okay, not that far. Okay, so one of the things that when I go out and I get a chance to talk to legislators and stuff like that about this is, we can go to the next slide. This is some information that I pulled out of the New York Times. This was 48 companies that received more than $100 million in state grants to relocate there. And I think if you know anything about the bigger ones, BMW or Boeing or Amazon, stuff like that, basically every industry expects you to compete for their business. Every industry wants you to create these incentives in order to locate there where you are. The difference is, and I could be wrong, but when I look at across the spectrum of companies here, we didn't compete for any of these. And the reason we don't compete for these companies is because of our geographic isolation. Everybody, including, and I'm not saying it was right to do this, but everybody, including Puerto Rico, competed for Amazon to get them to move their headquarters and stuff, and in the process gave up a lot of information to Amazon. But the truth is that there was no reason for us to even try, because anytime you have to deal with a raw material having to be shipped in and a finished product to be shipped out, we're just never going to be in that business. So when I look at what businesses we can be in, what businesses have been successful, what businesses we can build on, I think about the fact that film and television, which is massive, is on steroids right now because of Netflix and all the streamers. People have been shooting here since Thomas Edison sent his crews in 1906. And it has been a steady increase where people like to shoot here, but we are also literally the most expensive place in the world to shoot. And therefore, our incentives basically get us on a slightly even par when you could go to other places like Georgia, which is 30%, and has gone from a $98 million a year business in, I think, 2008 to a $3 billion a year business. They actually have 5 studios in Georgia. The largest is 700 acres. And it's actually a housing development as well, and many other things. We don't have any studios. We have one stage at Diamond Head with some warehouses, and it can accommodate one show. And it's been 5-0 for the last 7 years, I think. It was Lost for the 7 years before that, and now it's Magnum. But it's nothing that can accommodate the Jumanjis, the Jurassic Parks, the Pirates of the Caribbean, the big shows that come here for our beaches and jungles, but then have to pick up and go back to Georgia or London or Los Angeles or Vancouver because there are stages. So we have a lack of infrastructure, and that keeps us narrow. And I think that we also took the one business that I have seen be a consistent performer for us and decided to limit it. And I think that that's something that we need to think about and has to be part of the conversation, and not just isolating incentives in film, television content production as if that's something nobody else ever does. So the next thing I want to talk about is the fact that the Academy for Creative Media, like everybody calls it the film school. And in fact, the first program at Manoa is fantastic. And they are filmmakers, and everybody teaching there is from USC or the American Film Institute. And they do a great job, and they've developed some fabulous filmmakers. But when we got to go to West Oahu, I wasn't quite ready for this slide, but that's okay. When we got to go to West Oahu, we were able to take advantage of a new campus and build a program that was based on everything that's happened since we started ACM. And when we started ACM, there was no YouTube, there was no smartphones, there was very little social media. I wanted to use Friendster as a way to get people. That's how long ago it was, but that was the only thing I could think of to connect students online. But the whole world of how production is done and the distribution platforms that have become available that, quite frankly, are free to people who are clever enough to use them was not an option. So the campus at West Oahu is really what I call the transmedia school. So it is the social media school, it is the app school and everything like that. And this slide from Servco, I went to a presentation at the Sandbox, Entrepreneur Sandbox from Peter Dame at Servco. And these were the top jobs that Servco was looking for. Now, when I think of Servco, I still think of Lexus, I still think of cars. You don't see a single car salesman in this list. These are the jobs of the future. And Servco, which I had no idea either, when I went to this presentation last year, said they're like a $1.8 billion business, and they've been around for 100 years, and they're looking to ways to become a $3 billion business. And this is how they see getting there. So when people say to me like, whoa, there's no real studio here, there's no animation studio here, there's no video game company here yet. And those are all things that we definitely need and we need to talk about. What I look at is, are we creating graduates who can stay here with jobs that fulfill these positions? And so for my last slide, this is a short, brief slide of, you can go to the next slide, please. So these are the jobs that West Oahu students are getting. And some of them are absolutely working on Magnum, like Mahea at the top there. And some of them are absolutely working in film and television. But the vast majority of them are social media directors. The vast majority of them are providing those services that every company needs today, as things have migrated from a time when, say, if you wanted to market yourself, you had to go to, say, Anthology or Impact, traditional companies. And instead, everybody's moved so many people are moving things in-house because they really want to figure out how to go viral. They want the kids who can create an app for their product, for the smartphone. They want the kids who can shoot, edit, tell a story, and figure out how to get it on, onto a platform. They want to figure out how to get it onto TikTok. They want to figure out how to get it onto Snapchat. So that's really, we have a fabulous placement level in terms of actually graduating these kids to there. And I will say that that campus only came online in 2012 or so. So it's been 7 years maybe. Right now they have 252 majors, including ones from the neighbor islands. And the Manoa program, which has been around for 15 years now, has about 240 majors. That still makes it the single largest major in what's used to be called arts and humanities, and we're very excited by that success. But we're definitely, we're definitely seeing the kids on the west side and the kids choosing to go to that campus pursuing things like they are not necessarily thinking, I'm going to be Quentin Tarantino, I'm going to be Steven Spielberg. That's the kids at the Manoa campus, which is fantastic. But these are the kids that are really finding work in every kind of job. So whether you're a car dealership or a restaurant or a hotel, these are the kids that you want to hire. So, you know, we need both. I'll say we need both. But I think that that's been the sort of secret to our success, and why at both campuses, these are the two fastest growing majors that the campuses have. I think Western Wild is up 33% fall over fall, and that's even before this new building comes online. And the new building, I must tell you, is just going to be incredible. But it's a system-wide building, and it will be accessible to everybody, and it will also be accessible to industry. So that's my little presentation about credits and where we're going, I think, and where we need to go. And I look forward to any questions people have to how we take it to the next level.
Thanks, Chris. That's great. So what we'll do is we'll move over to Pat Sullivan, and of course, Pat's one of the well-known industry. I guess the company that I usually have featured on Bite Bars Cafe is something to do with Oceanit, because they're always innovating and creating new things. So Pat's been doing that for, I don't know, 35 plus years, and he recently came out with a book called Intellectual Anarchy. So I'm sure he'll mention that. But Pat, go ahead and share some of the cool things that are happening over at Oceanit, and of course you can embellish that introduction as freely as you want.
Thanks, Burt, and Roger for putting this whole conference or book and music festival together, and Chris, thanks for the update on that too. The thing I'm going to talk about is part of a creative economy, but a different part of it. And in my view, the creativity cuts across music, art, science, engineering, and a whole lot of other things. And that's what we found. And it seems to be part of this almost eclectic group we've put together at Oceanit. So what I thought I would do, and the title of the talk is this Intellectual Anarchy, Defeating Geography While Delivering Solutions Across the Planet. I'll give some examples of how we do this. And the reason is because, we are in the middle of the sea. And the idea that we can have thoughts that we can then, from those thoughts, influence the planet is a profound idea. So it's not just, for example, what Chris was talking about, media is a very critical channel for so many things, enabled by the internet and the connectivity everybody has, as Burt was saying, is, with broadband. But having ideas that can change the world are also possible, and we find that we're doing that more and more. But a lot of it is how you think about what you do. So we're a mind-to-market company, and it's very interdisciplinary. So the subjects in the fields are all over the map, from electrochemistry to materials to the product-centric people and design thinkers. So it covers quite a broad group. And then we have a process to bring it to market. And the way we bring it to market is quite varied and can be inclusive of a lot of different ways. Around a few hundred people, maybe 100 PhD level scientists and engineers, mostly in Hawaii, but other parts of the world, and we actually work all over. We're in these buckets: energy, aerospace, engineering, life sciences, and information systems. And we'll take something to market through spin-outs, corporate co-development, private equity, all kinds of ways. And this mind-to-market chart kind of illustrates the blue zone, where discovery, curiosity, it's almost like a mini national lab or university, does things that are way outside of what might be thinkable. The green side is all product focused, delivering to impact humans and society. And we connect those two through the rock and roll zone, because it never matches. The way you think it should, it's never quite the same. But that's a process that this kind of lays it out at a broad scale. And these two, blue zone and green zone, are actually two different cultures. The human-centric culture, from a product perspective, is different than the discovery culture. And creating a space for this to happen is what we do. We collaborate with about 60 universities and lots of companies, and especially this corporate co-development model. A lot of Fortune 10, Fortune 100 companies all over the world now. And We're getting better at it. I talk a little bit about some of this in the book. The process, which is what I'm going to take a few minutes to get into, we call it intellectual anarchy, which is also the name of the book. We kind of map out here, which is this interesting kind of process between convergent and divergent thinking. So thinking broadly and then thinking very, very specifically. And I'll walk through this just as kind of an example, but it always starts with a question. And the question is not limited by subject or geography. It's what's interesting and important. And we have this process we go through the last quarter of the year. We're just beginning the process now, every year like clockwork. And this is the conversation. What is interesting and what is important? And what is interesting and what is important is always a matter of perspective. But this is exactly how it starts. And we have this conversation. And we create the space to discuss this because what's interesting to me may not be interesting to you. But what we find is that this conversation leads to some really, really interesting ideas. And it usually then starts with a question. In this case, this illustration. This is a real example, but the question was, can we control combustion on a nanoscale? Which sounds like a pretty pointed question, but it has to do with energy efficiency in nanotechnology. And it turns out, you see in the upper left, we actually could. We learned to control combustion on a nanoscale, and then we literally put it in a water-based mix. You could spray it on the wall, shoot it with a laser, and blow the whole thing up. It was just incredible. Now, except for the risk of blowing up the lab, we thought, what the hell do we do with this? It was really an interesting thing because it produced like 8 times, 9 times more energy than TNT on a density basis. But then we thought, well, I can do a whole bunch of cool things with it. You know, I can look at medicine, propulsion, and there's quite an extensive list of things. And we ended up kind of leaning into things like nanopropellants, nano drugs. I can place a nano dot on a tumor, and with a switch, I can turn it on and put 3,000 degrees on a nano dot. Just some really weird stuff. But what that led to was this thing. So we literally just got the first patent on this. We call it unobtainium. It's a material that doesn't exist, but with it, you can create classes of material that are unthinkable. And then, of course, what do you do with that? Well, to actually build something to go through space, you got a lot of work to do. Unobtainium is something you could use a 3D printer with and produce something in space to protect you from radiation as you're traversing through space, for example. And that's the kind of material that's going to be needed that doesn't exist. You could also use it to go back and forth as you're coming through the orbit so that you don't burn up as you're going to Earth from space. There's all kinds of weird things, but that's an example. Another example, which I'm just going to go through very quickly, is the heat X. So heat exchangers. Turns out every power plant on the planet needs heat exchangers. We reduce energy by 7%. Who would believe, but at the beginning of the year, end of last year, we're in Abu Dhabi, that's where this is, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oklahoma, Texas. We're looking at power plants across the country. This week, we're actually deploying in India. Another interesting thing, Ultra. These all came about the same way, underwater broadband, a gigabit underwater. That's because we're looking at going offshore Brazil, 10,000 feet, to build an undersea city to operate at 10,000 feet with the Internet of Things, connecting everything underwater. We actually built this. We have versions of it here. All this is done in Honolulu, by the way. All this is done, you know, actually on 4th Street Mall. We haven't blown anything up. There's a lot going on there. All this is homegrown from scratch. The power of ideas is what this is all about. DragX. This is kind of an interesting thing because the nanopolymer that we put together to reduce methane leaking, which we did for the Obama administration, got really good results. And you see Chevron's a partner because everybody knows greenhouse is an issue. But it reduces drag by about 25%. So why is that relevant? Well, we're part of this project in India. As the glaciers are melting, you've got to move a lot of water across the continent. And reducing drag by 25% saves a ton of energy. So it's interesting because it starts with an idea. Ideas are not limited by geography, they're limited by imagination. And this one I put up here because it's just kind of crazy. We call it Blast Ninja. it's an industrial blast nozzle with, it's got a special inserts and exotic materials. We literally design and build these puppies. It's a long story, but it starts with aeroacoustics, aerospace, and design. We're shipping these all over. And I never would have figured it, but we get inquiries from Blast Ninja all the time, and it reduces noise. So people don't lose their hearing doing industrial blasting. Turns out industrial blasting is something everybody does on the planet, and there's no good answers. Last, I'll talk a little bit about this thing we're doing on the COVID test. It really started with a new kind of AI. We call it anthronoetic artificial intelligence. So it's a human-style intelligence, small data, ambiguity, edge cases, more like a person, not machine learning, not neural nets. And we started working on some just weird things. An example that I'll put out there is on justification. So Shakespeare is about 17,000 words, the play Macbeth. And I think a machine learning system would tell you how many words and make a word map, but we found a way to justify and say, well, it's about revenge, when revenge is never mentioned in the play. But we use the same linguistic, grammatical approach to look at DNA and understand how to read it like a language. And if you think about it, American alphabet is 26 letters, letters make words, words make sentences. You have infinite complexity with this approach, as you do, it turns out, with nucleotides. So the human genome is 3 billion base pairs, but it's actually, we're thinking maybe it's a language and we can read it and understand it. We use that technique to produce the grammar of RNA to design a molecule, which we're using for this test on COVID-19 called Assure-19. So intellectual anarchy, really to make it work, you need 3 things. And it's kind of shown here, but people, culture and environment, and organization. And you notice geography isn't there, but it is about people, it's about education, and it's about imagination.